So, imagine attending a really solemn funeral for a beloved friend.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that is a heavy scenario to start with.
Right. It is a tear-filled service.
Right?
The casket is being lowered into the ground,
Uh-huh.
and the grieving widow is standing there weeping, just, completely shattered by the loss.
That is just heartbreaking to even picture.
It is. But now, imagine a coworker of the deceased walking right up to that widow,
Okay.
and he pulls her aside, and he asks, hey, since he's gone, can I take over his corner office?
Wow. I mean, that is just completely inappropriate.
It really is. It sounds entirely unthinkable.
Yeah, staggering display of carnal ambition right in the middle of a tragedy.
Precisely. Well, welcome to Reform Thinking. I am thrilled you are joining us today.
We are very glad you are here with us.
We are taking a theological and exegetical look at a moment in biblical history where human ambition was, well, that grotesque.
We are looking at Matthew chapter 20, verses 20 through 23.
Yes, and to help us unpack this passage, we are drawing insights from two incredibly detailed theological commentaries.
Right. The first one is called Crowns in the Shadow of the Cross.
And the second one is The Cup of Wrath and the Decree of Glory.
Both of these sources bring a lot of weight to our discussion today.
They do. So our mission for this deep dive is highly specific.
We're putting the fallen human heart right under the microscope.
We are going to examine the innate sinful desire for self-exaltation that lives inside all of us.
And we will contrast that fleshly ambition with the substitutionary suffering of Jesus Christ.
But before we get into the historical background, I want to ask you, the listener, a direct question.
A very convicting question, honestly.
Yeah. Have you ever caught yourself doing the right religious things, but with a secret desire to be noticed, praised, or elevated above others?
I think we all have to admit we struggle with that.
Right. Maybe you volunteered for a highly visible role at your church.
Or you offered a very polished prayer in a group setting.
And while your mouth was speaking spiritual words, your mind was wondering who was admiring you.
That is the specific condition we are analyzing today.
This biblical text exposes the pride hiding right behind our most pious religious language.
When you realize the sheer audacity of what the disciples demand right after Jesus predicts his own torture, it makes his response completely shocking.
It really does.
Yeah.
So to grasp the sheer weight of that shock, we have to meticulously set the historical stage.
Right. Let us look at the year. It is approximately AD 33.
We are standing on the dusty, ascending road leading up to Jerusalem for the Passover feast.
And the socio-political climate at this time is suffocating.
First-century Judea is a nation completely crushed under the iron heel of Roman occupation.
And when we talk about Roman occupation, we are not talking about a mild administrative oversight.
No, not at all. The Jewish people are subjected to crushing taxation that leaves families destitute.
There is a brutal military presence on every corner.
And they face the constant daily humiliation of being a conquered nation living in their own promised land.
Because of this intense, grinding oppression, the religious and political atmosphere is absolutely electric with messianic fervor.
Right. The disciples, along with the broader culture, are intensely expecting a militant Davidic king.
They are looking for a political conqueror who will violently overthrow the Roman Empire.
Someone to cast out the occupying legions and establish a literal terrestrial kingdom.
A kingdom where Israel is restored to global dominance.
They are dreaming of a military triumph, not a spiritual atonement for sin.
Yeah, they possess a category for a conquering king who brings judgment to their enemies.
But they have absolutely no category for a suffering king who brings salvation through his own death.
They want the glory of the kingdom.
But they are entirely blind to the redemptive historical necessity of the cross.
That is the loaded, highly pressurized environment in which this infamous request is made.
And that historical backdrop makes the literary juxtaposition of this story so jarring.
It really does. When you look at the structure of Matthew's gospel, you quickly realize this event does not happen in a vacuum.
Right. Just 3 verses prior, in Matthew 20, verses 17 through 19, Jesus pulls the 12 disciples aside.
He isolates them from the crowds on the road to deliver his third and most graphic passion prediction.
He tells them plainly that he is going to be betrayed to the chief priests and condemned to death.
He says he will be handed over to the Gentiles, mocked, scourged, and crucified.
He lays out the gruesome, bloody reality of his impending substitutionary death.
He does not use metaphors here. He uses the literal terminology of Roman execution.
And then the very next paragraph introduces the mother of James and John asking for thrones.
It gives you theological whiplash, honestly.
Jesus speaks of his crucifixion, and they immediately try to secure their political appointments.
Yeah, it goes right back to your funeral analogy.
So when Salome, the mother of Zebedee's sons, approaches Jesus, she actually adopts a physical posture of reverence to make this demand.
Yes, she does.
I am looking at the notes from our sources, and it seems like she is using the physical language of worship to make a highly manipulative political play.
That is exactly what is happening.
How does the Greek text describe her approach?
Well, the Greek syntax reveals a terrifying hypocrisy in her actions, and it is something we need to look at closely.
Okay, let us break that down.
Matthew uses two specific verbs to describe her approach. First, she approaches, which in Greek is prosarchomai.
Yeah.
Then she kneels, which is proskinoush.
And that second word is significant, right?
Yes, this word proskinoush is a recognized attitude of worship, deep reverence, and total submission.
So outwardly, she looks like a humble, devout follower bowing down before her Lord.
But this outward posture of worship completely masks a highly calculated political petition.
She is using the physical language of reverence to cloak a fleshly grab for authority.
And the specific request she makes is loaded with massive significance.
She asks that her two sons sit at his right hand and his left hand in his kingdom.
We have to understand the royal court context of the ancient Near East to see what she is actually demanding here.
Right, the right hand and the left hand were not simply comfortable chairs at a banquet table.
Not at all. In an ancient royal court, these were the prime ministerial seats.
They were the positions of supreme delegated authority,
The person on the right hand was second in command, and the person on the left was third in command.
outranking everyone else in the entire empire.
Think of Joseph in Egypt, answering only to Pharaoh but commanding everything else.
She is asking for her sons to be the chief viziers of a restored nationalistic Israel.
This is a naked demand for absolute supremacy over the other 10 disciples.
The raw ambition is staggering, but Jesus looks at them and responds with a devastating statement.
He says, "You know not what you ask."
Now, I have to push back a little here, because this behavior absolutely baffles me.
I think it baffles a lot of people when they read it.
I mean, these men, James and John, are in the inner circle.
They are.
They have witnessed the dead raised. They heard the Sermon on the Mount with their own ears.
And they have walked intimately with the incarnate Son of God for 3 years.
How can their theology of the kingdom be so completely backwards at this late hour?
It is a great question.
They are standing literally in the shadow of the cross, and they're acting like ruthless political operatives.
Trying to secure cabinet positions before the election is even over?
How is this level of spiritual ignorance even possible for true born-again believers?
The answer to your question takes us straight to the Reformed doctrine of total depravity.
Okay, let's get into that.
It highlights the reality of remaining corruption in the life of a justified believer.
Right, because regeneration is a real and miraculous work of the Holy Spirit.
It gives a person a new heart, but it begins a lifelong process of sanctification.
It does not instantly eradicate the flesh.
Exactly. The disciples are genuinely born again, but their flesh still defaults to earthly categories of status, dominance, and self-preservation.
By nature, fallen humans want the crown before the cross.
We want the glory of the resurrection without the crucible of suffering.
The disciples cannot grasp a theology of the cross because their remaining sin is actively resisting it.
And this scene highlights the terrifying deceitfulness of sin.
Notice that the disciples did not ask for gross outward sins.
They did not ask for wealth or for the destruction of their enemies.
They asked for proximity to Christ.
They used holy spiritual vocabulary to conceal a worldly desire for superiority.
This warns us that pride often wears a religious mask.
It is entirely possible to use the things of God as a ladder for personal prominence.
You know, you can crave a position in your local congregation, cloaking it in the language of ministry or calling.
When the actual driving force is a desire to be exalted above your peers.
That brings us to a massive Christological contrast in this passage.
We see two completely different trajectories colliding on the road to Jerusalem.
On one side, you have the disciples, who are aggressively maneuvering for an ascent to glory.
They are trying to climb the ladder, secure the thrones, and elevate themselves above the rest of the group.
And on the other side, you have the King of the universe.
Who is deliberately, consciously moving toward a descent into absolute humiliation and death.
He is stepping down into the agony of the cross, while they're trying to step up into the palace.
Because the disciples are so ignorant of the true cost of the kingdom, Jesus redirects their attention.
He pulls their gaze away from future status and forces them to look at impending suffering.
He asks them a question that changes the entire trajectory of the conversation.
He asks, "Are you able to drink the cup that I am to drink?"
This imagery of the cup is fascinating.
In our modern context, a cup just holds a beverage.
But our sources point out that this is not a generic metaphor for having a hard time.
What is the theological weight of this cup imagery in the Old Testament?
This is a crucial exegetical point. In the original Greek text, the term is poterion.
Okay.
To understand what Jesus means by this, we have to trace its theological roots back through the Old Testament prophets.
Where the Hebrew equivalent is kos.
Right. When modern readers hear the word cup in this context, they often assume it is just a metaphor for physical pain.
Or maybe martyrdom, or the struggle of a revolutionary war against Rome.
But in the prophetic literature, specifically in Isaiah, Jeremiah, and Ezekiel, the cup is a highly specific, terrifying image.
It is the foaming chalice of Yahweh's unmitigated holy indignation against human sin.
Why a cup? In the ancient world, a cup was a meticulously measured portion dealt out by a host at a banquet.
The prophets use this imagery to show that God's justice is not a chaotic, uncontrolled explosion of anger.
It is a meticulously measured, perfectly exacted portion of wrath for sin.
And the guilty sinner is forced to drink it down to the very dregs.
In Isaiah 51, it is called the cup of staggering.
So, Jesus is not asking them if they can handle a difficult political campaign or survive a physical beating by Roman guards.
No. He is pointing to the absolute fury of the Father's justice against the rebellion of humanity.
This is a cup that he alone is stepping forward to consume in the place of his elect.
And the response of the disciples is absolutely chilling in its arrogance.
Without missing a beat, they look at the incarnate Son of God and boastfully reply, "We are able."
Let us just stop and think about the magnitude of that statement.
I want to offer an analogy to highlight the sheer absurdity of human inability in the face of God's holy standard.
I would love to hear it.
Comparing their answer to reality is like watching a toddler walk up to a massive 10,000-ton freight train.
Okay.
And the toddler grabs the steel wheels with his tiny hands and confidently declares that he can deadlift the entire train over his head.
That is a brilliant way to put it. It is not just wrong. It is utterly delusional.
Their response exposes the universal human delusion of self-righteousness.
Every time we think we can earn our salvation or satisfy God's law by our own performance, we are standing next to James and John,
saying, "We are able."
We have no idea the crushing weight of the divine justice we are claiming we can bear.
That toddler analogy really drives the point home. Their boast reveals a total lack of understanding regarding their own spiritual bankruptcy.
In addressing this delusion, we see Christ fulfilling his threefold office perfectly.
To break that down simply, theologians often describe Christ's work in three roles.
Prophet, priest, and king.
As prophet, he corrects their carnal misunderstanding of the kingdom, revealing the hard truth of the suffering that must occur.
As priest, he is actively preparing to offer himself as the spotless sacrifice.
Preparing to drink the very cup he is speaking about.
And as king, he asserts his divine authority over the nature of his realm, dictating the terms of true discipleship.
This exchange forces us to grapple with the doctrines of Christ's active and passive obedience.
Let me explain how these mechanisms work.
Please do.
Active obedience means Jesus lived the perfect, sinless life that we completely failed to live,
fulfilling every positive demand of God's law.
And passive obedience means he willingly suffered the penalty that we owed, absorbing the wrath of God on the cross.
Christ alone, as the sinless God-man, possesses the infinite capacity to drain the dregs of divine judgment.
A mere human would be crushed for all eternity under a single drop of that cup.
This reality exposes the fatal flaw of Arminianism and any system of works righteousness.
No human being has the ability, the will, or the inherent righteousness to satisfy the Father's justice.
Jesus is the exclusive cup drinker.
Through his substitutionary atonement, he takes the cup of trembling out of our hands.
And he drinks it dry, so that we never have to taste the wrath of God.
After Jesus acknowledges that they will indeed experience a measure of suffering for his sake,
meaning they will face persecution and martyrdom as his followers,
he firmly removes the distribution of kingdom honors from the realm of human effort.
He takes the pursuit of glory completely out of their hands and places it entirely in the hands of the Father.
He states that the seats at his right and left will be given to those for whom it has been prepared by my Father.
Now, I want to ask for some theological clarification here, because this text can be confusing for a lot of readers.
It definitely can be.
If Jesus says that granting these seats is not mine to give, does this imply that the Son lacks divine authority?
That is a common objection.
Is Jesus subordinate in his divine essence to the Father? How does Reformed theology synthesize this statement without compromising the Trinity?
That is a highly critical question. This text is frequently twisted by those who deny the deity of Christ.
Claiming it proves he is less than God.
To answer it properly, we have to look closely at the Greek grammar and then at our systematic theology.
Okay, let us start with the grammar.
Jesus uses a specific Greek verb here, hodomimastai, which is a perfect passive indicative.
Theologians call this the divine passive.
This grammatical structure indicates an action that was completely finished by God in eternity past.
With the results of that action continuing firmly and unchangeably into the present.
Jesus is pointing directly to the Reformed doctrine of God's eternal decree.
Right. If we consult Chapter 3 of the Westminster Confession of Faith, we find the biblical teaching of unconditional election.
The architecture of the coming kingdom, the rewards, the specific placement of every single saint.
These are fixed realities.
They were established in the immutable counsel of the triune God before the foundation of the world.
Before Genesis 1 even occurred.
Therefore, when Jesus says it is not mine to give, he is not denying his ontological equality with the Father.
We look to the Westminster Confession, Chapter 5, concerning providence, to understand the economy of salvation.
Christ's statement reflects his perfect, willing submission within his mediatorial mission.
As the incarnate Son, the mediator of the covenant of grace, he delights in carrying out the Father's exact decree.
He does not act independently of the Father's eternal plan.
His words display the breathtaking beauty of his obedience as the God-man, not a lack of innate divinity.
This specific point about the sovereign decree completely shatters modern pragmatism.
And the prosperity gospel that is so rampant today.
Think about the messaging you hear constantly in modern religious culture.
You are told you can manifest your destiny.
You are told you can volunteer your way into spiritual authority.
Or give enough money to manipulate God into granting you prestige and a larger platform.
But this verse crushes that lie into dust.
Human ambition cannot alter the sovereign decree.
You cannot hustle your way to the right hand of the king.
The seats have already been prepared in eternity past.
This text destroys the idea that the church is a corporate ladder for ambitious people to climb.
It forces us to view our place in the body of Christ through the lens of God's unchangeable will,
rather than our own aggressive networking.
Having established these high doctrines of substitutionary atonement and the eternal decree, we must apply the law and the gospel directly to the modern Christian life.
In Reformed theology, we frequently utilize the three uses of the law to properly handle a text like this.
Think of it this way. The first use of the law acts as a mirror.
When you read this passage, it should reflect your own wretched reflection back to you.
It exposes our own Zebedee-like craving for platforms,
our desire to be acknowledged, and our complete inability to drink the cup of God's standard.
It shatters our pride.
Then the gospel announces the good news. Christ drank the cup of wrath for us.
He fulfilled the law's demands in our place.
Once we rest in that gospel truth, we move to the third use of the law, which acts as a guide for the believer.
Because our salvation and our ultimate standing are secured by Christ and decreed by the Father.
We are freed from the exhausting rat race of self-promotion.
We are now guided into a life of grateful, humble obedience.
Ministering to others not to gain rank, but out of immense gratitude for the grace we have received.
I want to push this application right into the heart of modern evangelicalism.
Please do. It is very needed.
Look at our church culture today. We are obsessed with celebrity pastors.
We are obsessed with personal branding, marketability,
and scaling ministries to reach the maximum number of consumers.
We treat the bride of Christ like a Fortune 500 company.
We measure greatness by social media reach, book sales, and the size of the crowd.
But Jesus contrasts this entire system with his own kingdom.
He points to the Gentile rulers who lorded over their subjects,
who use their authority to dominate and extract value from people.
He says that shall not be so among you.
He calls his followers to slave-like submission.
The path to greatness in the kingdom of Christ is the path of washing feet.
It is the path of obscurity and sacrifice.
If you are pursuing ministry to be seen You are operating under the Gentile mindset, not the mind of Christ.
That is a necessary and sharp warning.
It really is.
But we must also see how this passage provides massive stabilizing comfort for the afflicted believer.
That is a beautiful point. Let us talk about that comfort.
If you are a Christian experiencing obscurity, if you are enduring loss or facing persecution in your workplace or your family because of your faith, you need to hear this.
The cup of discipleship you are drinking is not an accident.
Your suffering is not a sign that God has lost control or that you have failed to manifest enough blessing.
If God has sovereignly decreed your specific place in his kingdom,
Whether that involves a public, visible role or a hidden, quiet life of faithful endurance.
you can rest with total contentment in his immutable purpose.
You do not need to fight for relevance.
The Father has prepared your place,
The Son has secured your soul by drinking the cup of wrath.
and the Spirit will sustain you in whatever trials he ordains for your sanctification.
You can let go of the anxiety of status and simply rest in the sovereign goodness of God.
As we summarize this deep dive into Matthew 20, we see the core clash revealed in the sources.
On one side, we witness the relentless, exhausting human vanity that constantly seeks a crown without a cross.
We see our own desperate attempts to exalt ourselves above our brothers and sisters,
On the other side, we see the breathtaking majesty of the Savior,
who deliberately step down into humiliation,
who willingly drank the foaming cup of divine wrath to its very dregs.
all to secure our redemption.
Therefore, we offer a final pastoral call to you, the listener.
Flee from the wretched idol of your own merit.
Stop saying, "I am able," and confess that you are entirely unable.
Reject the exhausting cultural pressure to seize a platform and build your own kingdom.
Take refuge entirely in the imputed righteousness of Jesus Christ.
Recognize that because Christ drained the cup of divine judgment on the cross,
The cup that is now extended to you as a believer
the cup you partake of at the communion table,
is a cup of sheer mercy and new covenant life.
he drank the wrath so you could drink the grace.
That is the beautiful truth of the gospel.
I want to leave you with a final, lingering question to ponder on your own as you go about your day.
It is a question that really changes how you view your entire life.
If the highest honors and the exact details of your place in the coming kingdom have already been prepared by the Father since before the world began,
How does that reality completely free you from the exhausting burden of trying to prove your worth to anyone today?